Ah, bowling. Did you know that there is a much easier video I could make here? Bowling bulb is fundamentally flawed. Here's why. The issue with making videos like this is the fact that, often, the correct statement is an absolute nightmare to figure out or experience. So, yeah, no, you better thank me for this. Or not, as, let's be real here, you probably would agree with that hypothetically easier video, don't you? Historically, I think it's safe to say bowling is a little, underappreciated, to put it exceptionally lightly. I'm pretty sure most people I've seen have called bowling bulb among the weakest plants in the game, which is straight up wrong. The issue lies in its difficulty to use, I imagine. Bowling bulb requires 3 essay papers to learn to actually use, requires specific support, and requires you to understand theoretical quantum physics in order to make it actually do stuff. Or at least that's how I feel, and probably some other people. Maybe. Whatever. This doesn't make bowling bulb a great plant. If you need to spend 10 years mastering a plant, that can hardly be seen as grounds for it to be a fantastic one. And it's certainly defined by its weaknesses, unlike most other plants. Yet, well, I think this thing is one of the best plants to use. Not mechanically, of course not. I don't really care for the best of best, but it's certainly very fun to use, and way more effective than you may expect. But why should we be hanging about introducing crap? We've got stuff to cover. Let's get them covered. What on earth is bowling bulb? Bowling bulb is a trio of, well, bulbs. These are the child form of various plants. So, that's a fun mental image. No, actually, it's worse than that. These bulbs have faces. Unlike most of plant projectiles, the projectiles are indeed very much alive. They have faces on them, they have an idle animation. Not only that, they are born rapidly and get sent to their deaths immediately. I'm starting to think that the plants aren't actually the good guys. You know, this has made me question what on earth are you actually planning here? Like, is there just an entire colony of these guys underground? What on earth is being actually planted here? Because this has stopped making sense to me utterly, I'll be entirely honest. Whatever. Bowling bulb has a few unique mechanics. For a start, he will charge his shots up. When there isn't a zombie in their lane, the larger bulbs will grow. It starts with all 3 bulbs available, but it can only fire each once. It will stop regenerating bulbs when it can attack, which means it will often use the smallest bulb, which does the least damage. The larger bulbs do huge amounts of damage compared to the small bulbs. The medium bulb does 3 times the damage of the smallest bulb, and the largest bulb does 4.5 times the damage of the smallest bulb. At level 1 at least. When you level bowling bulb, the order of shots will change. At level 3 it'll become medium, small, large, and at level 7 it'll become large, medium, small. This makes them significantly stronger, though I don't deem them necessary. For the rest of this video, this will be ignored, as this is objectively dumb and I'll cover why later. The other major gimmick of bowling, which is clearly totally unimportant, is that its shots bounce off zombies. They can jump between zombies to hit multiple zombies, and often the same zombie several times if they are together in a lane. These shots have a 50% chance to bounce up or down, then every next zombie they hit will cause it to bounce the other way. The exception is the edges, where the bulbs will bounce back or bounce into the main field. This also includes on pirate seas, where they just sorta float. I guess it makes sense that projectiles have faces. They clearly have a mind of their own and just refuse gravity. How wonderful. Either way, bowling bulb has a pretty poor fire rate, as they have to grow before they can fire. Growth takes a while, but it can fire off shots fairly quickly once charged, so there is that. Finally, bowling bulb's plant food effect is potent. It will fully reload all of its shots, and uber buff them. It will fire all 3, one at a time, and each one will do 600 damage splash in the tile they hit. However, like normal shots, they do this each time they bounce. Bowling bulb plant food is notoriously powerful at clearing out hordes, and is something you absolutely need to keep in mind, as it is worth bringing and using well. Anyways, that's everything there is to bowling mechanically. Now we have to cover the other stuff that comes with bowling. Like, you know, how on earth do you actually use it? Right, now's the fun part, which I am so excited to cover, with sarcasm dripping intently from my words. Okay, let's just get this over with. This might be a long section. Let's start with how you should be running bowling to begin with, which is as a DPS plant. Bowling Bulb is a great damage dealer, and that's something you need to be bringing him for. Bowling's DPS is utterly nutty, but he is extremely unreliable, especially against high HP targets. The way he fires is extremely inconsistent. Sometimes he will nuke the swarm of bucketheads, and other times he gets caught in a conehead. This is a big part of bowling, but you can find ways to get around this, such as running another plant alongside bowling. Good plants can include stallers, but also just other attackers, turning bowling into one of the few plants that are used as a secondary attacker. I'd recommend running plants like Red Stinger, Peapod, or other reliable attackers, as these synergize the best with Bowling Bulb's toolkit, allowing the small bulbs to do their thing and wreck the back line. Oh, by the way, the larger bulbs aren't the end-all. Sure, they are super strong, and help create a unique pace of play for the plant, but you can live without them. Often when bouncing between zombies, the small bulbs can hit the same target 2 to 3 times, and the damage racks up fast. The big bulbs aren't going to grow back too often naturally, after all, so you are bringing Bowling Bulb for the group clear. However, if you are in a position where these large bulbs can grow back, which is more common than you'd think, you can do some serious, super heavy damage, and is very worth keeping in mind. Anyways, Bowling Bulbs have a very unique weakness. They are awful at targeting the top and bottom lanes. No, really. The way bulbs bounce, it's very hard for the top and bottom lanes to be given nearly as much attention, as there is only one way for them to bounce into them directly, which is the adjacent lanes into them. It's difficult to get this plan to hit those targets. As a result, and this was the last thing you'd ever expect me to say, but I recommend running Jalapeno. Exclusively with Bowling Bulb, mind you, but it's absolutely worth keeping in mind. See, here's the thing. Lane-based instas usually are worse than 3x3 instas that do the same thing, because usually all lanes will be doing about equal, with maybe one lane being hit slightly worse than the others, which you put the old cherry bomb on. But in this case, there's 2 main lanes in trouble, being the top and the bottom, so unironically Jalapeno is a far better pick. In addition, instas like Ghost and Squash are pretty good at removing the tough single targets that pose an issue. This also helps clear lanes to allow bowling to grow into the larger bulbs, which can then do an absolute ton of damage if allowed to. Again, it's not mandatory to using a plant, but this can make bowling utterly dominate hordes in the right situation. It's just trying to find that situation, manufacture that situation, that makes Bowling Bulb so strong in this case. The big bulbs are the D in DPS for sure. Bowling Bulb can be a bit easier to use in some worlds. Ancient Egypt and Dark Ages are most notable due to their graves, though do not, I repeat, do not use bowling against Jester under any circumstances. It will ruin you. Bowling is generally fantastic against graves, as they have a large hitbox, and bowling can generally clear them out much quicker than other options, and they can help contribute to scaling damage. Frostbite Caves can be similar sometimes with its ice blocks. Wild West is a special case, as Bowling Bulb works well with minecarts. Minecarts allow it to generate higher tier bulbs pretty easily, which makes Bowling Bulb's DPS utterly nuts. It's certainly worth mucking with. Velocity is fine sometimes. For some reason, bowling can hit airborne targets like Bug, and it can deal with parachute drains quite nicely, though it can't destroy excavators. Though, as its shots do bounce off, it's actually better suited for them than most plants, interestingly enough. In most other worlds, it's nothing noteworthy, or there really isn't much to bring up. Except for Big Wave Beach. It's absolutely awful in Big Wave Beach, and you should absolutely never actually use it there. Bowling is at its best when its damage is enough to remove most things, and Big Wave Beach has no traits that make bowling a good pick. It's technically fine at dealing with fishermen, but that's all it can do. It doesn't have the single target damage to deal with octos at all, and surfers are too fast for bowling. Heck, if you string zombies in water, you legitimately just can't hit them with bowling. Now, admittedly, this is both super niche and probably applicable to most plants, but still, nightmares. Beyond this, you unlock bowling super late into the game. Like, after you unlock bowling, the only world left is modern day, which you can't really unlock as at the time of writing, the game crashes if you try to play Big Wave Beach 18, so you can have him for about 6 levels officially, all of which are Big Wave Beach, and seemingly dedicated to make you hate bowling. I wonder why people don't like him. Okay, but putting all the hatred on this single trait is, quite frankly, dumb. Plant vs. Zombies 2's progression has changed like 3 different times, including one where you had to beat the Gargantua level in order to move on to another world of your choosing, or one where all the worlds are available from the start. People would still often get bowling late into the game, but it's not the be-all end-all of it. And when a progression works, bowling is still available through modern day, which it's totally usable in. So, why do people hate bowling so much? Well, the answer is, obvious, but let's cover it in more detail. 'Tis fascinating to me, after all. Bowling is hated for obvious reasons, as I've already said. It's hard to use. That's the main chunk of it. Most plants in Plant vs. Zombies 2 are very simple to use, with little drawbacks or extra elements to keep in mind. One of the more complicated plants in this game is Torchwood, because it doesn't do a whole lot alone, but frankly, saying that feels exceedingly dumb. Torchwood's support is told to the player, while bowling simply aren't, after all. The issue lies in that Plant vs. Zombies 2 is a casual game, a very casual game with a very casual audience. As a result, there is no real expectation for players to learn how to use particularly hard plants or tight strategy. Casual means approachable, but not necessarily easy as you can see in Big Wave Beach. As a result, most plants don't have noticeable downsides, or required support, or even really good timing being required. Most plants will do their thing instantly, or simply, without much extra issue, and due to the game's difficulty, you can grow used to this, which certainly hinders Bowling Ball's popularity. This isn't really an issue of the game overall, but it does cause issues for a few plants. When you have so many plants, eventually you want to create plants that have a weakness, or inevitably will create a plant with one simply by necessity. If not a plant with a weakness, a plant which requires specific support to work, without it being totally obvious that it is the case. Some plants also just tend to be underused because they really require more active play, such as magnifying grass or banana. These plants require more effort to use than just place and run, so a lot of casual players have no interest in using them either. Because why would you use a plant that requires effort to use when you can just spam dusk everywhere, right? Now, the difference is that magnifying grass and banana are generally easy to use, and easy to make powerful regardless. Both plants are up there for some of the best plants in the game, and it is not really close. Bowling has it one step worse. The issue with bowling isn't that it's unusable, but that it requires a player to play into his strengths and around his weaknesses, which no other plant really requires. Sure, technically banana and magni needing manual effort is a weakness, but that's debatedly a strength, while bowling doesn't really have an equivalent there, does it? Heck, even when bowling works, it's usually working in the same levels other, stronger plants could, making it not an appealing option. Now, the real question is whether or not this is good or bad design. I'm not actually sure. In terms of having every plant be equal, it's certainly a blunder, for sure. It's a plant that most people aren't going to use, and it's clearly misplaced for it to be valuable at all. But by the same token, that doesn't really matter too much overall. The existence of bowling doesn't make every other plant worse. It doesn't ruin the game, and it does actually add something to the game, in a roundabout way. because it allows people to make their own fun, even if it won't let anyone beat a level they otherwise wouldn't. And, depending on your definition, that's perfect balancing. The job of balancing is, ultimately, to make a game that is fun. No option should be completely worthless, so that one guy who wants to use a plant can. This to me is the entire point of balancing, and is the sign of a well-balanced Plant vs Zombies game. In every instance, there will be several plants at work, will always work, and people will gravitate towards them. In a well-designed Plant vs Zombies game, though, that's not mandatory to have fun, and the other plants mostly serve the purpose of allowing people to have fun. One of the key skills to learn, I find, is to master the art of making your own fun. The ability to go beyond what is reasonable and just run whatever damn hell you want is a fantastic skill, and a big reason why I like Bowling Bulb's existence. Often, the best way to make a game interesting is to challenge yourself, to force variety on yourself, and otherwise force yourself to do something interesting. This is especially important in games like Plant vs Zombies, and is where a majority of my own fun from the game comes from. You ever notice how I tend to use really whatever in the background of these videos? Most of what I use is actually pretty darn bad, far from optimal or whatever. If you look closer, I actually rarely run a lot of premiums unless I'm specifically trying to show them off, too, for the same reason. Often using bad units, or otherwise lesser units, and trying to get them to work is far more fun than a serious strategy. And bowling to me occupies this place perfectly. Because it's not bad, it's just a definitively hard plant to use. Hard plants to use are great for replayability, as learning to use them is one of the greatest funs of the game for me. It's a shame Plant vs Zombies 2 doesn't tap into this more, but plants like bowling add a lot to the fun at high tiers of play, where the challenge becomes not trying to win, but trying to win with plants that aren't used much, and have these weaknesses, that require you to rethink everything. It's a fun playstyle, and one I wish the game tapped into more. It's one of the fundamental issues of PvZ, really. The game has potential for some incredibly interesting, unique, and diverse strategy, and this is really entertaining, but the game never really encourages the player to go down this route. There's also very few plants that fit this bill. Sure, there are exceptions, plants like Levitator come to mind, but most plants are very simple to use, with no real weakness to play around, or learning curve, and so this is something I appreciate bowling for immensely. A big part of this is that Bowling Bulb isn't a weak plant. It is worth the risk it offers. It's got sky-high DPS, a fun pace using it, and just overall is potent. It's not like you're straight up handicapping yourself by using bowling, but it's got enough traits to make it difficult to work with, but make it satisfying to pull off well. It's super smooth, and a bowling strat that can find its legs is generally among my favorites to run. It just feels good, and that's a huge part of good plant design. I just wish the game pushed you further. Right now, the game mostly pushes you in modes where optimization is key, so playing in fun ways is punished massively. This has a habit of killing a few plants, and changing where I find it fun in PvZ2. For the record, this is the main reason I don't like Arena, as it feels like I'm being pushed to play the same strategy 5 different times to slightly optimize it, which just isn't very fun for me. This is also why I don't like Little Bowling, by the by. They removed the part of the plant that makes it fun by simplifying its usage down, and I think this ruins the point of the plant. I can appreciate that leveling is creative for a different audience than I am, but I don't really like it all too much. But whatever. I recommend using plants like bowling in your own time, but also keep an eye out for the more unique plants. They may not be optimal, god no, but they may certainly offer a bit more than you initially think, and are just generally fun to use. It's certainly how I've kept myself from getting bored of PvZ2 and its mods, and I certainly recommend it. You know, I really need to pick easier videos. Seriously, why do I keep talking about things nobody agrees with instead of covering the mainstream points? Like, I could seriously just talk about how, I don't know, Zoidbean is awesome, or Blooming Heart is utterly useless. Nobody would ever complain about those videos, and they'd be, yeah no, easy? It's not hard to easily do the maths to find out why Blooming Heart is a weak plant. At all. Well, whatever. If I took the easy way out, there isn't really a point to these videos, would there be? Still, I can only dream. Bowling Bulb is a favourite of mine, and I hope I've reignited some interest for the plant into you, at least. It would be a nice change of pace at any rate. There's some really cool stuff that's just under your nose sometimes, and that's worth keeping in mind. Use plants for the sake of using plants, not to win. It's more interesting that way, I can assure you. 'Tis the season to be jolly, so we are getting a little bit close to Christmas time. Next video is on Holy Barrier, by the way, so subscribe, bell, and like in preparation. Add YouTube statistics statement here. Wait, otherwise, this has been Creeps, and have a good one.